Hi everyone, in the fourth section of your geography work booklet there's a focus on a non-renewable energy resource. So I'm going to talk to you today about natural gas. Okay, so I'm really quickly going to go through how natural gas and other fossil fuels were formed, and we're going to look at some of the positives and the negatives of using and extracting natural gas. Okay, as always, there's our email addresses. Drop us a line if you need help with anything. Right, so as you saw from the last video, natural gas is a fossil fuel. It's a non-renewable form of energy. Okay, this means once it's used up, it's not coming back. Okay, now how exactly are these fossil fuels formed and why is it we call them fossil fuels? I'm going to quickly go through with you now the process. Right, coal first of all. So coal, it took millions and millions of years to form. The energy in the coal comes from the energy stored by plants that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. Now at this time the earth was partly covered with swampy forests. Okay, and then for millions of years a layer of dead plants at the bottom of the swamps. It was covered by layers of water and dirt, and this trapped the energy of the dead plants, and then over time the heat and the pressure from the top layers help the plant's remains turn into what we call coal. Okay, and what about natural gas and oil as well? Okay, I've got three diagrams at the bottom of the screen there to help illustrate this. So all the oil and the gas we use today began as microscopic plants and animals that lived in the ocean millions of years ago. As these microscopic plants and animals lived, they absorbed energy again from the sun, which was stored in their bodies as sort of carbon molecules. Then they died, these plants and these animals, and they sank to the bottom of the sea. Over millions and millions of years, again, layer after layer of sediment and other plants and bacteria were formed. So these plants and animals, they became buried ever deeper. And then again, as with coal, the heat and the pressure had an impact on it. Okay, the amount of pressure and the degree of the heat, along with the type of the biomass, determined whether it turned into gas or oil. Okay, so more heat produced lighter oil. Even higher heat or biomass made predominantly of plant material produced natural gas. So as with coal, oil and gas, it's taken millions of years for them to form, and we're using them very, very quickly. And once they're gone, they're not coming back. Okay, so that's a really brief outline as to how those fossil fuels were created. Okay, so I'll quickly talk to you now about some of the positives and the negatives of natural gas. Okay, so I've got them on the board. We're going to look at advantages first, and as we always do in geography, we split those advantages into social, economic and environmental advantages. Now hopefully you'll know what I mean by social advantage. That's it's something that affects people. Economic, that always refers to money or wealth, and environmental is obviously the environment. Okay. Right, so why is natural gas a good source of energy? People, social advantages, it's easy to transport. Okay, they get transported in huge pipes that stretch right across a country. It's fairly light, as you can imagine. It's not like transporting coal where you need big lorries. And it's fairly safe to use as well. Okay, used in the right way, it is quite safe for people to use. An economic advantage, it's very cheap. There's lots of it available. It says there as well. I guess it is cheap because there's lots of it available. Okay, there's huge global reserves of natural gas. Some countries have a lot more than others. and obviously those countries are benefiting from that. And environmental advantages as well. Although it's fossil fuel, it is cleaner than other fossil fuels. Okay, it doesn't emit as much carbon dioxide when it's burnt as coal, for example. And it doesn't produce any waste. I think I mentioned this in the last video. Coal, when that's burnt, okay, you get lots of ash and dust that's created from that. There's no real waste, physical waste produced from burning natural gas. Okay, so there we are. There's some of the advantages in a bit of a nutshell there. It's cleaner than coal. As I say, about 45% less carbon emissions than coal, and about 30% less carbon emissions than oil. And if there was a leak, a gas leak, for example, it disperses quite quickly. Okay, it doesn't stay in an area; it sort of spreads and disperses into the atmosphere quite quickly. So, in terms of harmful or hazardous to humans, there's a little impact there. Okay. Right, so what about some of the disadvantages next? Okay, again, social, economic and environmental. If there is a leak, it's hard to detect. Okay, it doesn't have much of a smell like some gases do, so you don't really know it's there if you had a leak. Okay, and another social disadvantage might be that there can be issues that stop its transportation. Now, I think I mentioned this a couple of videos ago, when Russia had a dispute with Ukraine. They stopped the gas supplies being transported through Ukraine, so a lot of Europe had, as a result, shortage of gas. Okay, so there can be disadvantages in that sense. Okay, political issues can stop its transportation. An economic disadvantage this time. Although the gas itself, it's quite cheap to use and to purchase, the pipelines that are needed to transport are very, very expensive. And as I said, these pipelines can stretch right across a country. Okay, hundreds, thousands of miles sometimes. Okay, so it's very expensive to create this infrastructure that's needed to transport the gas. Another economic disadvantage, it is expensive to store as well. Okay, it takes up a lot of space. Gas takes up more space than oil, believe it or not, 4 times as much space. So obviously it's quite expensive to create the facilities to store the gas as well. And then lastly, environmental disadvantages. Okay, although it's cleaner than other fossil fuels, it does, when it's burnt, emit carbon dioxide, and we know that's an issue because of the greenhouse effect and global warming and all the issues associated with that. One way we can extract gas is through something called fracking. I think I mentioned this a couple of videos ago as well. Now, fracking is a very controversial form of controversial way of extracting gas from the earth. It involves drilling deep down into shale rock and splitting open those shale rocks, and the gas is released from them. However, earthquakes have been detected in the areas where this is happening, which is obviously hazardous for the people and the environment that live there. And there's also been explosions at some of these fracking sites as well. So there it is in a nutshell. Really briefly, there's the advantages and the disadvantages of natural gas, and there is the how they're formed as well. Okay, thanks for listening.